The smell of dust, detergent, and something vaguely burnt greeted Ada as she stepped into hostel room 17 for the first time. Her suitcase wheels dragged reluctantly across the cracked floor tiles, as though even they doubted her decision to leave her quiet village for the chaos of university life. The room was small, 4 metal beds, 4 lockers, and one rattling ceiling fan that looked like it had survived several generations of students. Still, Ada smiled faintly. This was the beginning of something, even if she didn't yet know what. One by one, her roommates arrived. Zainab came first, confident, stylish, and already on a phone call negotiating what sounded like a business deal. Then came Ifunanya, loud and cheerful, carrying more clothes than seemed physically possible. The last was Tolu, quiet and observant, with a notebook clutched tightly to her chest. 4 strangers, 4 different worlds, forced into one room. That night, as they lay awake listening to campus noise and distant laughter, none of them knew that room 17 would change their lives in ways love never could. By the end of the first week, assumptions had already formed like invisible walls between them. Ada noticed how Zainab always seemed to have money, new shoes, takeout meals, endless data for her phone. Ifunanya, on the other hand, lived loudly, laughing through lectures and flirting her way through awkward moments. Tolu barely spoke unless spoken to, always writing, always watching. Ada kept to herself, counting every naira she spent, afraid of running out before the semester ended. But cracks began to form in those assumptions. One evening, the power went out, plunging the hostel into darkness. In that shared discomfort, something shifted. They talked, really talked, for the first time. Zainab admitted she wasn't as rich as she seemed. Ifunanya revealed she was hiding academic struggles. Tolu shared a poem she had written about loneliness. Ada listened, then finally spoke about home. That night, room 17 stopped being just a space. It began to feel like something fragile, something human. Reality hit hard when Ada checked her account balance 2 weeks later. It wasn't just low, it was frightening. Meals became smaller, then skipped entirely. She tried to hide it, but hunger has a way of revealing itself. One afternoon, she fainted briefly during a lecture, brushing it off as just stress. But Tolu noticed. Tolu always noticed. Back in the room, the truth came out. Instead of pity, Ada found something unexpected: action. Zainab suggested small business ideas. Ifunanya offered to connect her with a campus catering gig, and Tolu quietly placed her own saved money on Ada's bed without a word. It wasn't charity, it was solidarity. In that moment, Ada realized something powerful. Survival didn't have to be lonely. Maybe, just maybe, fulfillment wasn't something you chased alone, it was something you built together. By the 3rd week, room 17 had developed unspoken rules. No one asked too many questions, but no one ignored obvious struggles either. They began sharing food without making it a big deal: half a loaf here, a spoon of stew there. Ada slowly regained strength, though she still insisted she was fine. Zainab rolled her eyes every time she said it. One night, Ifunanya declared they needed a proper system. "We can't just be surviving randomly," she said, pacing dramatically. They agreed to pool small amounts weekly, what little they could afford, and support whoever needed it most. It wasn't perfect, but it gave them something rare: control in a life that often felt unpredictable. Zainab's phone never stopped buzzing, and curiosity finally got the better of them. One evening, Ada asked what she actually did. Zainab hesitated before admitting she ran an online thrift business, sourcing clothes cheaply and reselling them at a profit. It sounded glamorous, but the reality wasn't. She dealt with unreliable suppliers, difficult customers, and constant stress. Still, it worked. Slowly, the others began helping. Ifunanya modeling clothes, Tolu writing captions, Ada managing deliveries. For the first time, money started flowing into room 17, not much, but enough to ease the pressure. Ifunanya's laughter could fill an entire lecture hall, but her grades told a different story. When test results came back, she barely passed. She joked about it at first, brushing it off like everything else. But that night, Ada found her quietly crying. The pressure from home was intense, Her parents expected excellence, not excuses. Instead of teasing her, the others stepped in. Study sessions replaced late-night gossip, and slowly, Ifunanya began to improve. Her laughter returned, but this time, it felt less like a shield. Tolu remained the hardest to understand. She listened more than she spoke, observed more than she participated. Her notebook was always with her, filled with words no one else saw. One evening, Zainab grabbed it playfully, expecting jokes, but what she found was raw, emotional poetry about loneliness, fear, and longing. The room went quiet. Tolu expected ridicule, but instead, she found admiration. For the first time, she shared her work willingly. It was the beginning of her voice being heard. Love entered room 17 quietly. Ada met Chaik in the library. A calm, kind student who seemed to understand her without effort. Their connection grew naturally, offering Ada a kind of peace she hadn't known. Her roommates were thrilled, but cautious. They had seen how love could distract, consume, even destroy. Still, they supported her, watching closely. Ada felt hopeful, but something about it also felt fragile, like happiness she wasn't entirely sure she deserved. As Ada spent more time with Chaik, she spent less time in room 17. At first, it was subtle, missing dinners, skipping group study sessions. Then it became noticeable. Zainab didn't like it. People always disappear when love shows up, she muttered one night. The others didn't respond, but the tension lingered. Room 17 had become a unit, but now, something was shifting. The shift became real when Chaik began pulling away. Messages went unanswered, plans were cancelled. Ada tried to stay calm, but anxiety crept in. When he finally admitted he needed space, it hit harder than she expected. She returned to room 17 that night, quiet and distant. No one asked questions. They simply made space for her. Sometimes, silence was the kindest form of support. Ada tried to act normal, but heartbreak has a way of revealing itself. She avoided the topic, burying herself in studies and small tasks. But the others saw through it. Instead of forcing conversations, they stayed close, watching movies together, sharing food, filling the room with presence. Slowly, Ada began to heal. Not because of time, but because she wasn't alone in her pain. Money was still tight, but their efforts were paying off. Zainab's business grew slightly, and Ada's catering side job became more consistent. Even Tolu started earning small amounts by writing poems for events. They celebrated every win, no matter how small. A successful sale meant shared snacks. A passed test meant music and dancing. Joy became something they created, not waited for. Not everything was perfect. Tensions rose when Zainab started keeping more profits from the business. She argued she deserved it. After all, it was her idea. The others didn't disagree, but it still hurt. Room 17 had been built on shared struggle. Now, it felt like lines were being drawn. It was the first real conflict they couldn't ignore. The argument came late at night, loud and emotional. Words were said that couldn't be taken back, about money, effort, and loyalty. But something surprising happened. Instead of falling apart, they talked it through. Really talked. By morning, nothing was magically fixed, but understanding had replaced resentment. That mattered more. Zainab began to see things differently. Money mattered, but it wasn't everything. She adjusted how she handled profits, ensuring fairness without losing control of her business. For the first time, she admitted something she'd been hiding. She was afraid of being poor again. The others understood. Fear had shaped all of them in different ways. Ada stopped checking her phone for messages that would never come. It wasn't easy. Habit and hope are stubborn things. But she forced herself to redirect that energy into something tangible. Between lectures and her catering job, she kept her hands busy and her mind occupied. Back in room 17, the others noticed the shift. She laughed more, spoke more, and slowly reclaimed the space she had abandoned emotionally. Heartbreak didn't disappear, but it stopped defining her. Study sessions became a nightly ritual. Books spread across beds, highlighters clutched like weapons, and arguments over answers filled the room. Ifunanya struggled at first, but this time she didn't hide. With patience from the others, concepts began to click. For once, she felt capable, not just loud and entertaining, but truly intelligent. Tolu's hands trembled as she stood before a small crowd at a campus open mic night. Her voice nearly failed her, but she began anyway. By the time she finished, the silence was heavy, then came applause. Real, loud applause. Back in room 17, she didn't say much. But her smile said everything. Zainab's business grew beyond expectations. Orders increased, and suddenly she needed help constantly. Instead of controlling everything, she began delegating. It wasn't easy, but trusting the others made the work lighter. Room 17 wasn't just surviving anymore, they were building something. Just as things improved, a supplier scammed Zainab. Money was lost, orders couldn't be fulfilled, frustration filled the room, but no one blamed her. Instead, they regrouped. Failure wasn't new, it was familiar. And that made it easier to face. Ada suggested diversifying income, small, practical ideas from her catering experience. The others agreed. Slowly, they built multiple streams: food sales, writing gigs, clothing resales. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. Stability began to replace constant fear. If Unanya received her first strong test result, she stared at it in disbelief. That night, she didn't celebrate loudly. Instead, she sat quietly, absorbing the feeling. For the first time, she believed in herself, and that changed everything. Tolu's growing recognition brought attention, both good and uncomfortable. People wanted to know her, define her. She struggled with it, unsure how to balance visibility and vulnerability. But room 17 remained her anchor, a place where she didn't have to perform. Zainab pushed herself too hard. Between business, school, and expectations, exhaustion caught up. When she finally broke down, it shocked everyone. The strongest among them needed support too. And for once, she allowed herself to receive it. They began scheduling rest, actual rest. No work, no pressure, just being. It felt strange at first, almost guilty. But slowly, they realized something important. Survival without peace wasn't fulfillment. Ada met new people through her work. Different perspectives, different struggles. Instead of losing herself in them, she learned to stay grounded. Growth wasn't about replacing old bonds, it was about strengthening them. As exams approached, anxiety returned. What came after university? Jobs? Responsibility? Late-night conversations turned serious. Dreams were shared, fears admitted. No one had answers, but they had each other. Each of them experienced progress. Tolu published, Zainab stabilized finances. If Unanya excelled academically, Ada expanded her work. Individually, they were growing. Together, they were evolving. The end of the academic year loomed. It felt both close and distant. They began to reflect, not just on achievements, but on who they had become. That mattered more than anything else. One quiet night, without planning it, they talked about everything: love, money, failure, hope. And in that moment, it became clear. Fulfillment wasn't ahead of them. It had been with them all along, in room 17. Then came the season that tested everything they had built. Fees rose unexpectedly, deadlines tightened, and the fragile balance they had created began to shake. The pooled savings weren't enough this time. Panic returned, but it felt different now, less isolating. Instead of retreating into fear, they moved with urgency. Zainab negotiated new suppliers more carefully. Ada took on larger catering jobs, sometimes exhausting herself. If Unanya tutored junior students for extra income, and Tolu began writing commission pieces. Every effort mattered, every small success pushed them forward. There were nights of frustration, moments when it felt like it still wasn't enough. But there were also breakthroughs. A successful bulk sale, a well-paid writing contract, a catering event that brought in more than expected. Slowly, the pressure eased. Through it all, something stronger formed. Not just friendship, but trust built through shared struggle. They no longer questioned whether they could rely on each other. They knew. Time moved faster after that. Academic pressures intensified, but so did their confidence. If Unanya, once uncertain, now led group discussions. Tolu's poetry gained attention beyond campus. Zainab's business became steady, no longer chaotic. Ada found rhythm in her work, even mentoring others facing financial hardship. They were no longer just reacting to life. They were shaping it. Graduation approached quietly at first, then all at once. The reality of leaving room 17 settled in slowly, like something too heavy to fully process. Reality hit harder than exams ever did. CVs were sent, applications ignored, interviews uncertain. Confidence wavered, but they pushed forward. This was a different kind of test, one without clear answers. Rejections came quickly and often. Emails that began politely but ended in disappointment. It hurt, but not as much as it would have before. They had learned resilience the hard way. Opportunities came in unexpected forms. Not perfect, not ideal, but real. They began to understand that life rarely followed neat plans. Flexibility became their greatest strength. The idea of perfect success faded. No one had it all figured out. Instead of chasing perfection, they chose progress. It felt more honest, more achievable. The room slowly emptied, clothes folded, books packed, memories revisited. Every corner held a story. Leaving felt heavier than arriving ever did. They stayed up longer than usual, talking, laughing, remembering. No one wanted to say it, but this was the end of something irreplaceable. They expressed what had long gone unsaid. Gratitude, love, respect. Not dramatic, not exaggerated, just real. The final morning came quietly. No tears at first, just silence. Then, one by one, they left. Not broken, not lost, just change, carrying room 17 within them. And somewhere beyond the uncertainty of the future, beyond love that came and went, beyond money gained and lost, they carried something lasting, something they had built together. Fulfillment.